Day. Here we are. As you know, today is Earth Day. This day, Americans celebrate our glorious natural heritage and renew our pledge to care for God's creation. On this day, the President is having a virtual meeting with leaders of 40 countries to address the climate crisis. Today, the President has taken historic, transformative action by announcing the bold pledge that America will cut our carbon pollution in half by 2030. To put this in perspective, President Obama committed to a 25% pollution reduction by 2025 in the Paris Agreement. President Biden, and it is anticipated that we'll reach that goal, and now President Biden is doubling that cut in 5 more years to 2030. I think I got a lot of stuff here. In order to do that, we need the American Jobs Plan. When any of us, starting with President Biden, talk about climate, and you hear the president say this all the time, when I think about climate crisis, I think of one word: jobs. Jobs. Well, our chairs are advancing American Jobs Act, which we hope will be bipartisan. Millions of workers are in need of a good-paying job while our infrastructure is crumbling. Despite being the wealthiest country, we rank 13th globally in the quality of our infrastructure. You know the figures that the poor grades that the American Society of Civil Engineers gives us on the condition of our infrastructure. Now is the time for a once-in-the-century investment to create millions of good-paying jobs, ensure Americans can compete with any country in the world, and pave the way for economic growth for years to come. I say once in a century. It's early in the century. I'm sure others will have maybe something even bigger down the road, way down the road. To build back better, today is important. As a part of the For the People agenda, we reintroduced the powerful Drug Price Reduction Act, the Elijah Cummings Lower Drug Cost Now, in honor of our dear Elijah. This is about families. You've heard me say again and again that when we're out on the campaign trail or in Zooms and the rest, this is the cost of health care, especially prescription drugs, is debilitating for families. I've seen grown men cry because they just cannot meet the obligations that they have for their families if they have someone in drastic need of drugs on an ongoing basis. So that when we did the Affordable Care Act, it was essential because we could not sustain the cost of health care. It was unsustainable to individuals, to families, to small businesses, to corporate America, to the taxpayer. And one of the successes of the Affordable Care Act was to decrease the rate of increase of health care costs, which we succeeded in doing except for one thing: the cost of prescription drugs. And that's why we have been trying again and again to have legislation passed that enables the Secretary to negotiate for lower drug prices. In the beginning, when we started, it was about Medicare drug prices, but then in this legislation, it's about all drug prices. It is unacceptable that Americans have to pay 3 times more for prescription drugs for the very same drugs that are sold 1/3 of the cost overseas. Millions of Americans, as I say, cannot afford their medicines, particularly during the pandemic, where profits have soared for the pharmaceutical companies. Also this week, in the For the People agenda, we have legislation on the floor. This morning, we are passing H.R. 51. Some of you were with us yesterday when we talked about that with Eleanor Holmes Norton, to secure statehood for the District of Columbia, for Washington, D.C., whose residents pay taxes, fight in our wars, power our economy, yet do not have a full voice in our democracy. Yesterday, we passed 2 bills, a No Ban Act, a real cause for celebration to get rid of that act of discrimination, and the Access to Counsel Act, rejecting xenophobia and discrimination on the basis of religion, and reaffirming that all people, including immigrants, are entitled to civil rights, civil liberty, and dignity access to counsel. Finally, but before I go on about the District of Columbia, let me just talk about this. I said yesterday when I was here, because Denny was talking about his history of how long he was going back, and how far they went back on this issue, and I said, this District of Columbia statehood is in my DNA. And I bring you this picture. I mentioned it yesterday. I said, come to my office and see it. But until COVID enables you to do that, I brought it here. This is a picture of my father and the First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt. It was the first time he had a hearing as the chair of the District of Columbia Appropriations Subcommittee. As chair of that committee, he was known as the unofficial mayor of Washington because, sadly, the Congress had so much say over what happened in the District of Columbia. He did not support that. He was all for home rule and what would come after that. But this was an invitation he extended to Eleanor Roosevelt, and she, as I said, was the First Lady to ever testify in Congress. And she testified about the conditions in St. Elizabeth Hospital, welfare institutions in the District of Columbia. And this is the picture that was taken. We're so proud of it. And again, proud to help, but help meant letting the District of Columbia decide for itself. So as everybody talks about how long they've been working on it, DNA, District of Columbia, statehood. So that was then. This is now. Next week, we celebrate 100 days of the Biden-Harris administration. At that time, with the American Rescue Plan and President Biden's actions, we have made extraordinary progress in crushing the virus and recovering from the economic crisis. Yesterday, we reached the milestone, our country reached the milestone of administering 200 million shots in under 100 days. As we said in the rescue package, vaccines in the arms, money in the pockets, children in school, people at work. Now, 100, first he said 100 shots in 100 days, and then the success was so great that he succeeded 200 shots in less than 100 days. Half of the adults have at least one dose. Over 80% of seniors have had their first dose, up to 8% it went from 8% when he took office of seniors having their first shot to 80% of seniors having their first shot now. In the first month of the administration, also 80% of educators and school staff have received their first dose. Many are now fully vaccinated. This was quite an eventful week in many ways. In terms of the verdict in the Derek Chauvin murder trial, I want to salute our colleague, Representative Karen Bass, Madam Chair, for her tremendous work on the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. Last year, May 25th, was a horrible day that we saw George Floyd murdered before our very eyes. By June 8th, the House introduced the Justice in Policing Act under Karen Bass's leadership. Soon after, in a hearing that would come up before it could come to the floor, we had a hearing. The family was here. They asked me and said, Madam Speaker, can this bill be named for our brother and for his daughter to know that his life mattered? And I said, if you think the bill is worthy of George Floyd, we will name it for him. The bill survived the committee process, passed on the floor on June 25th, 1 month from the day of the